Hi, welcome back to Spring CS170. We're going to be hitting chapter 5 in this video. So let me go back to here. So you can see here from our student schedule, this is what we're covering this week. We're covering chapters 4, 3, and 5. I've already covered chapter 3. I'm actually going to go into 5 and then put 4 after that because we actually continue on to 4 next week. Right, so just as a reminder for everyone, you can kind of see things are moving pretty quickly. You see all of this white section here. This is basically what's going to be on the first exam, right? So this goes all the way up to here. And you can see we're over here already. Um, so I think the way this is organized, really, there's the aspects that I mentioned at the beginning of the course, where it's basically kind of like facts. You just kind of either memorize them or you know where to look them up, right? Because you're going to be able to refer to your textbook for your exam. Then there's the mechanical portion, right? The mechanical portion is the numerical conversions that you've been doing, which a lot of you have been giving me your extra credit, and it looks really good. So just remember to save that work and just understand how to do those conversions. It's very mechanical. Just know how to do it, follow the example, and then you'll be able to do it for the exam. In some ways, the HTML is kind of similar. Let's, work through it, gather examples of it. There's going to be a couple of typical things you're going to do with HTML. So, and there'll be like HTML guide sheet too, right? So you can refer to it, but I think it's useful going beyond the guide sheet to also have the examples to go with it, right? So you have the tags, you know what the tags mean, but then you actually show what that means, okay? As an example, right? And then when you see it in the exam, you'll be able to go right to that and say, okay, this is how I create a table, or this is how, I set up like, a page to have this type of text, whatever, right? Um, in my opinion, if you're able to do all of that, you should do well for the exam. Okay. Now, someone asked me again about like the quizzes. The quizzes, again, they're not meant to be hard, right? They're only going to be something that, again, you go through it, take notes on it, and store it away. Use that as examples that you're probably going to see on the exam. Okay. If you miss it, not the end of the world. We're going to open up all of the quizzes at the end of the semester, so you'll be able to get those points, right? So you can see how many quizzes there are, right? And if you remember back in the syllabus, we kind of showed you to break out the quizzes. To me, they're kind of like bonus points, right? They're not that hard. You should be able to pick them up, and it adds a significant amount of points to your grade. Okay, if you add up all of the extra credits, the assignments, and whatnot, you see it's actually a greater percentage of your grade than even the exams, right? We tried to de-emphasize the exams in terms of points and make it so that it's very achievable for people to do what you need to do and get a good grade in this class, okay? But, feel free to let me know if there's any sort of confusion on this. So anyway, this is where we're at. Let's move forward here. So here we are, chapter 5. We're talking about web searching. Okay, so you remember for chapter 3, we're talking about networks. We're talking about how people communicate over networks, sending stuff over the internet, the packets, TCP/IP. If you go back to the last video or the PowerPoint, or the PDF, I should say, uh, you put right here at the beginning all of the different teaching points. Just know these terms, right? And same thing when you look at the textbook. These are teaching points. Make sure you understand these points, right? And I'm gonna try to hit these as we go, right? But all of these different things will probably pop up in your exam. And this is kind of similar to what I was saying about like the parts where you just kind of memorize it or have it the definitions ready at hand so you can look them up if needed, right? Um, so this is again another one of those type of sections, right, for web searching. Okay. All right. So how does a search engine work? Okay. So you can kind of think of it as like um, it's not like when you punch in a search into Google that immediately it starts to go searching and look for whatever you punched in, right? Actually, there's like a lot of pre-work that has gone into setting up so that the searches are nice and quick, right? Because if nothing was done and then you just typed in something to say I'm going to search for whatever, it would be a much slower experience, right? You probably know you type in something, you get a response like very quickly, right? And the reason why it's able to return results very quickly is because it does a lot of pre-work, right? So pre-work to basically index the data beforehand, okay? So it's almost like you go to a library, there's some sort of like organization of the data in the library or the books that are in the library, such that you can go in there and you can find what you want fairly quickly, right? But if there was no organization of that data in the library, you'd be sifting through a whole bunch of books to figure out what you wanted, right? Or to find what you wanted. So by the same token, that's exactly how a search engine will work, right? There's all this pre-work that has to get done, okay? And so what does that mean? So one thing it would do is basically crawling through web pages, right? There's a term that's being used. And so what is it doing, right? It's, for the purpose of this class, it's basically, something going out there, not maliciously, right? It could be malicious, right? But I won't get into that because that's not really a purpose of this class. For the purpose of this class, the search engines are going to go through pages, right? So it has to go through, check out the page. Let's say you created a new page, or a whole bunch of people just started pointing to this new page that's come out, and they say, hey, there's something new. Let me put that into my index. Let me figure out what does this page talk about and what type of people will be interested in this page when they search for XYZ, whatever it is. So that's what it means by crawling through the web pages, okay? And so what does it do when it crawls through the web page? Well, there's a whole bunch of different information in the page, above and beyond if you put some text on the page, right? You can write something, right? You can put some HTML and put some text in there or whatever. It could be looking at that, but there's actually other different things in there, which is called metadata, um, which people can, or the crawlers can be looking at to figure out what is this page about and the context of that, uh, the content, such that when people are making a search, they say, okay, most likely people are searching for something like XYZ, they'll be interested in this page, okay? Uh, and so after they've analyzed the content, they figure out what these different types of uh, things that people would be interested in and basically store it into an index, right? And when you look at the index, I guess I'll draw the analogy to um, the library. If you have like a card catalog or something like that, that's kind of like analogous to the index for the search engines, okay? Um, now, the index is one thing, um, but being able to say, let's say I have a book about apples or something like that, right? Um, that's still a lot of books, right? So by probably a lot of books, I've never looked for a book on Apple before, but presumably there's probably a lot of pages talking about Apple, right? And it could be in different contexts, right? It could be like the apple that you eat, or it could be like Apple, the company, stuff like that. Um, and especially in the on the internet, all kinds of people can write all kinds of stuff, right? They can write about Apple, so you can bet there's probably a whole bunch of pages talking about Apple, right, in some shape, form, or context. Well, then you say, okay, which ones do you put on the first page, right? And that's the idea of these ranking algorithms. So you have the index here, right? There could be a whole bunch of pages, right, in this index, but it's like information overload. If I want to look at it, I'm going to get inundated with a whole bunch of stuff for Apple, right? So then this idea of ranking algorithms will be able to say, oh, do you want only about Apple, like what type of apple? Is it the apple that you eat, or is it the apple, the computer, the company, and stuff like that? Um, is this like, some random person that just typed Apple? Um, or is this like, some sort of authoritative source that is putting out very valuable content about Apple, right? And all of that plays into these ranking algorithms, which we'll go into in a little bit. So hopefully this kind of explained it to you. And you can see these arrows here, right? So here you are, right? You're doing your queries, right? And it'll go through the ranking algorithms to figure out of this index which ones are most likely the most valuable results for you to look at and put those up front. You can still see the other results, but it'll be like way back there. I mean, I don't know how many times you do a search and you go beyond the first page. Most likely you probably do a search and whatever you're looking for, you find it right away, like on the first page. So God forbid if you're not on the first page, you're never going to get found, right? So these ranking algorithms is pretty important, right? It's one thing to kind of get your page out there um, and get it on the index, but like I said, there's thousands and thousands of pages. You need to get ranked, get your page ranked so you're near the top. You pretty much appear on the first page when you get searched, okay? So okay, so this page kind of has like a helpful video here. Actually, what I'll do, I'll actually um, paste this link into the resources, so you don't have to try to pull it out of the PDF, or you don't have to type this over again. So you can watch this on your time. Like I said, I'll take this and I'll paste this into my link, so you'll see this up on my page. Okay. Treat it as a resource, right? So that's like a resource for week 3. I'll put it in there, okay? Okay, so this is what I was saying about metadata. When we start getting into the HTML, you start seeing these type of things um, on your page, and all of these play into your search engine. The crawler is going through and trying to uh, pull the relevant bits and pieces on the page to feed into its indexing and its ranking algorithm. Okay, um, so this is a example of what they were talking about for like an index here. Okay, and you can see it looks kind of like what you might see if you look at the back of a textbook, right, or a book, to look at all of the different topics and what pages they're on, right? So this is pretty much analogous to that, right? You look at the index and you say, oh, I'm looking for this, and here's the pages that it's on, okay? And so this is where we go into, like, most of the time you're gonna have a more sophisticated query. You're not gonna just search for one thing, right? Like I said before, if you're searching for Apple, how do I know which Apple you're interested in, right? You're probably gonna type more than that to refine your search a little bit. So you get into things like this where you say human-powered flight. Behind the scenes, it's gonna treat it as like an and, right? So it has to, whatever pages you're looking at, as it's referring to as tokens, you have a human and powered, and it's in capital here, and flight, right? So basically it's trying to find all 3 of these to optimize your search result. If you just search for human, you can imagine how many results you get. If you just search for powered, you know how many results you're probably going to get, a lot, right? And then flight, of course, you're going to get a ton, right? But then if you try to do an intersection of them with the and, that's going to narrow down your results substantially, right? So here's the token here, here's the token here, here's the token here, and then it says, oh, look, here's rs.org, rs.org, rs.org. So that's what I mean by intersection, right? Boom, 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 right? That's your intersection. And then that's what's going to come back on your result. Okay? So I hope that's pretty clear there. So you get into these Venn diagrams. This is something else that's going to be on your exam. Okay. So what we just described with the and, were all three of them. So if you look at this circle as the universe of stuff that will come back when you look for a human, this circle here is the universe of stuff that you'll get when you look for powered. This circle is the universe of stuff that you'll look for on flight. But if I say I want the intersection, I want all three of them to be in the same result that I come back with, then it's only this little shaded area here where all three of them overlap, right? And so that's how like these ands here would look like when you draw in this Venn diagram, okay? So you can see this, right? Basic queries um, and and in this case is called a logical operator. Okay, so the other things would be a or, right? So and or are the most common things you're going to be looking at. And is probably the easiest one. When you get into like mixing up the ands and ors or the nots, some of the queries get quite complicated, and just typing it in, I have to say, it's probably not the best. You're better off just trying to use the advanced query tool from Google and just check the boxes on it, as opposed to trying to figure out how to structure the logical operators so that you'll get the results that you're interested in. And frankly, probably 99% of the time I'm doing searches, it's going to be using and in my searches. But that's just me, okay? All right, so this is where we get into the or. So if you can see, we kind of used the or with the human powered in flight again. Now it's any one of these things, not all three of them together must be, right? So if it must be all three of them together, then it's only this little center area here. But the minute you switch this over to an or query, that means, sorry I wrote this, that means it could be anything, right? If there's anything that refers to a human, it will be picked up. It doesn't have to have flight. It doesn't have to have powered, right? That's why it's called a or, right? So it could be the human, it could be the power, or it could be the flight. So it's a huge universe of things that you're going to return here, okay? But that's what happens when you do an or. So these are two important things to try to remember and understand, right? And represent it in a Venn diagram, right? So remember this, what happens when you have an and, right? That means exactly what it means, and, right? So human and power, it has to overlap. When it's an or, that means it could have just one thing or it could have all three of them. It doesn't matter, right? Everything will get picked up. Okay, so these two are the first two common cases here, or the basic cases. And then here's another case here where this is where it gets a little bit trickier, combining the ands and the ors, right? And sometimes some of them are a little bit flaky, trying to get your head around it. And you might just have to play around with it. If you just if you have a couple of cases you want to try out, just search it on Google, right, and put it in like this, and then see what the results are that come back. Okay, so in this case they're saying human and powered, right? So I look at these because they're within the parentheses, right? So within the parentheses I say human and powered, right? So that's pretty much this intersection right here. Right? So you have human and you have power, so you have to have two of them, both of them, which is this intersection here. Okay. Once I've got that defined, then it says or flight. Right? So or flight just means like it includes anything that can have flight in it, whether it intersects with the human or intersects with the power, or it's just flight by itself. Right? So that's why the whole circle for the flight is circled in like this. Okay. So have a think about it, see if you can grasp that, right? So just think of intersections for ands, and think of like the whole big circle whenever you're thinking about an or logical operator, okay? Okay, so this is just another OR thing here. All right, so this with the not baseball thing, let me send that to a separate clip here. So let me just end here. We'll say we covered like the Boolean operators, not the Boolean, logical operators, I should say. We covered that for the basic cases, and, or, and then and the Venn diagrams that go with it. We'll cover the more complex ones in my next video. Okay, thank you.